everybody, and welcome to episode 12 of the Student's Verdict podcast. Thank you so much for joining me for today's episode. For our new listeners, hi, my name is Emily and I'm your host. If you haven't already, please go and listen to some of our earlier episodes, which include cases such as the disappearance of Marlene Oakes, the McMartin preschool abuse scandal, and the case of missing and murdered teenager Tina Fontaine. Please follow us on Instagram at The Student Verdict Pod and on Twitter at Student Verdict. As always, resources used in this episode will be linked in the show notes. Today's case is very special. Today, we will be covering the missing persons case of Kelly Bergh Dove, who disappeared from her place of work on the 18th of June, 1982. Kelly was working at the Imperial Gas Station on South Main Street, Route 11 in Harrisonburg, Virginia, where she was working on her own. On the 18th of June, she was working the overnight shift, during which time she made 3 increasingly urgent phone calls to police. She phoned them to complain of a man who was harassing her. The third phone call she made ended abruptly, and when police attended the gas station, they couldn't find Kelly. That was 38 years ago, and her family still has no answers. During this episode, I will be speaking with Elaine, Kelly's younger sister. I'd like to welcome to the show a very special guest, Elaine. Thank you so much for joining me today. Elaine, can you please introduce yourself and just tell me a little bit about you and your family?
Yes, my name is Elaine. I live in the state of Virginia, and my family is a big, close family. We have a sister that was abducted 38 years ago this past June and has never been found, nor has the person who did this been found. The case has recently been reopened by a young detective that is doing a very good job. Her name is Brooke. And we've just been waiting for 38 years, basically, for answers.
That is a really long time to have to wait to find out what happened. And this is your sister, Kelly. Can you tell me what Kelly was like? I think she was 2 years older than you, wasn't she?
Yes. Actually, 2 years and 1 month exactly. We were both born she was born August 30th. I was born September 30th. So it was pretty cool. But,
that's so sweet.
Kelly was she was, I guess, the most tomboyish of all of us. She didn't fear anything. She was a tough person for her stature. She was short and very small, petite girl. Wonderful sister. I was pretty close to her because we shared a bedroom all our lives until just before she got married and had her child. So it was kind of odd not to have a room with her anymore.
Mm-hmm.
But once she moved out of the house, it was even more different because she wasn't just downstairs anymore.
Cool.
But I still went to her house every weekend, just about as many weekends as I could, and hung out with her and my niece and just had a good time together. She was a very good sister, very good.
And as you say, I understand that at the time that she disappeared, she'd got married, she had a daughter, and she'd moved out of the family home.
Yes.
And how many sisters? There's 4 of you, I want to say.
There's 3 sisters and also a foster sister that my mom and dad took in for a few years, but she's, to me and my sister, she's just like one of us. Cool. You would think she was raised with us as similar as she is to some of us.
Oh, and I understand that, again, at the time that she disappeared, Kelly was, she was going to, or she had enrolled in community college. Is that right?
Yes.
And what was she studying? Do you know?
I think she wanted to start studying nursing, become a nurse. And of course, she never got that chance. So.
And can you remember, and I don't want to obviously sort of upset you, but can you remember the last time that you saw Kelly?
Yes.
And where was that? Was that at your home?
No, that was at the store. This is always the hardest part for me to say. That
No.
was at the store she was abducted from. But the last time I saw Kelly, I think is what helps me continue on.
Hmm.
I had kind of had a small spat with one of our older sisters. Nothing big, just a sister thing.
Yeah.
And it upset me. So Kelly and I walked into the bathroom where we were working. And as always, she made me laugh and told me not to let things get to me so bad. And the very last thing that I said to her was that I love you and I'll see you this weekend. And that was the last time I saw her.
I understand that we'll talk a bit more about the location, um, where she disappeared from. I understand that you and your sisters, you all worked at this gas station.
Yeah, they worked full time there, but I would come in and help like stock the shelves because I had another job. And that's what I was doing that day. Me and Kelly spoke, just stocking shelves and helping them out a little bit. But her and my other two sisters worked there full time as cashiers. My one sister managed the store. She was the manager.
Okay, and what was this place like? And sort of what can you remember from working there? I know this was a while back, but
It was just a little convenience store.
Mhm.
Gas, like a little small gas station, but they sold snacks, drinks, cigarettes, the basics. It was on a main highway. And back then, our town wasn't as big as well, the city. I lived away from it, but it's a whole lot bigger now than it was back then. It was still a college town, but not quite as big as the growth as it had since then.
Was it quite, you say it was on a highway. Was it quite isolated?
No, it was within the city limits. For that time of night, it kind of was because nobody was out and about. Um, there's a few other businesses around it. It was 2 miles, maybe 2 or 3 miles from downtown,
Hmm.
where like the police station was and the courthouse and all the busy stuff. So it was only a few miles from there.
And how far was it from, say, your family home or Kelly's home to the gas
Kelly's
station?
house, it was probably whew, 20 minutes or more because she
Okay,
lived
so
out in
not
the
too far
country.
then.
No, she lived out in the country, so it was about 20, 30 minutes away from where she was living at the time, and probably 15 minutes, about 10 minutes from where my mom and dad were staying.
And again, I know this is sort of quite upsetting to talk about, but can you describe the day that Kelly disappeared? This would have been the 18th of June, 1982. So obviously we are talking a long time ago. But can you remember that day?
Yes. Um, I was staying with my two older sisters in an apartment, and I remember being woken to Kelly's gone, they can't find her. And of course, you're when you start waking up, you're like, is that real or am I dreaming? Then I heard mom again. She had came by because back then we didn't have cell phones and my sister didn't have a house phone, so my mom and dad had to stop there first. And they continued on and left and went to the store, and we got dressed and went to the store directly after. So we were there probably by 5 a.m., between 4:30 and 5 a.m.
And when you got there, um, what was the first thing that you did?
Um, I went inside and I don't know, I guess I just had to look for myself.
Yeah, of course.
We had already glanced around. And there was the thing that bothers us is there was no tape, like a crime scene tape. They were
Yeah.
not even taking fingerprints. Um, I forget how long I was there before I did this, but it was daylight already. And I remember walking behind the store. There's a field behind the store, like a grassy field. And I don't know why, but I just walked back there, I guess, thinking maybe if something happened, she'd be back there. But we just sat and waited, actually, just There was all we could do.
Were there a lot of officers and sort of forensics there when you arrived?
No, just a few officers. I guess the boss, the lieutenant, he came a little while later. And like I say, the family and I are all wondering why they didn't tape it off and take fingerprints.
Yeah.
But over time, they said the reason they didn't take fingerprints is there would have been too many. I don't care. Go through all those people. That's not an excuse, in my opinion.
No, I would have thought that fingerprints would have at least provided you with a possible lists of suspects that you could sort of cross off, if they
Yeah,
had an alibi later.
that's what we considered of because when she made the phone calls, apparently in the last phone call, it ended abruptly, and you hear like a little background noise, and the phone hangs up. So who's to say that that's not when this person got her? And who's to say he didn't grab the phone? His fingerprints would have been on it, but they didn't even dust that. They didn't dust anything.
When you've got there, did the store look did anything look unusual in the store, or did it look completely normal?
Oh, it looked completely normal. She had a magazine laying on the counter that she had been reading. Um, Back then, you could smoke inside an establishment, and
Yeah.
her cigarette she had laid her cigarette in the ashtray, I guess, to go make the phone call, one of the phone calls, but it had burned all the way down. She had a pack of cigarettes with money in it, still laying there. Her purse was still there. Everything is just like she had went to the bathroom or she had just took a walk or something. Everything of hers was still sitting right there.
Did she have I presume she had car keys and a vehicle?
No,
Oh, she
her
didn't.
her husband dropped her off at work that night.
Oh, okay. So, because you've mentioned these phone calls, which to me were really quite scary when I think about if I was at an establishment on my own. There were three phone calls, I think I'm right in saying.
Yes.
And from what I've read, they sort of seem to become uh, sort of she was increasingly sort of more scared with each phone call that she made to the police.
Yes, especially the last one. You can hear the nervousness. And like I said, Kelly wasn't an easy person to get nervous, I guess you can say. She unless something was really wrong. So that's how you can tell something it was whatever this guy did within the phone calls and the coming in the store and everything, it really did scare her. So there was reason to be scared now that, of course it's done with.
Am I right in thinking? I think I've read this that actually Kelly wasn't supposed to work that night. It was one of your sisters who was supposed to work, but she swapped shifts with them.
Yes, I think Kelly had an appointment. I'm not positive on this. I'd have to ask the sister that she switched with,
Mhm.
but it was very rare that Kelly worked third shift, and my other sister liked that shift. I guess that was her favorite shift. But Kelly had an appointment, I believe, is why they switched shifts, so she could still get her hours and be off the day for her appointment during the day
And
for her.
what time was her shift supposed to end? Do you know?
Um, Probably 10. I think she worked 10 to 6 that night. It would have been at 6 o'clock the next morning, I believe. I'm not positive of what the third shift was back then. I forget.
So these phone calls, I don't have a time for the first call, um, but I or the second one, but I know that she called the police twice to report that there was a male customer who was harassing her, and as she was working alone, I think she just wanted the police to sort of be aware and keep an eye on things.
Yes.
And
Yeah, she asked that in every call. Would you please send someone to keep an eye on me?
yeah,
And
and nobody attended until, is it the third time?
the after the third phone call, the officer says he was there 2 minutes after that, but we have no way of knowing because there's no surveillance, like video.
Yeah.
They didn't have dash cams back then. So we're still concerned, and we question how quickly he really did get there.
Because that third phone call that came in, I think, at 2:30 a.m. and she was, as you said, she sounded frightened.
Yeah,
I think she was receiving, from what I've read, anonymous and obscene phone calls.
yes, and also in one of the calls, she described somebody come in, the same guy. She she assumed it was the same guy. Came in dressed inappropriately, so we don't know if he flashed her or if maybe he just had his pants down. We don't know what she meant by inappropriately.
And did you or your other sisters, have you ever received phone calls, strange phone calls like that when you worked at the gas station?
No,
So it's
I guess the team
just
nearby had. What was that? I'm sorry.
that.
I broke
So
the
it
call.
was That's okay. It was just that night that that these strange phone calls happened.
Yes, as far as that story goes, as far as I know, I don't recall my other sister saying anything, but there was a store a couple blocks over that female clerk was being harassed by phone calls, and she is the one that was, and I guess he came in that store as well, trying to be inappropriate, and she's the one that gave a description of the car and of the person, but we don't know if that's the same one. It's just kind of too much of a coincidence for it not
Yeah.
to be.
And what I mean, do you know anything about the man who was reportedly harassing Kelly on the night that
No.
she disappeared, or do you have any suspicions as to who it might have been? I know you can't mention names. Um,
They have a few persons of interest at this point, and the one I knew of, I knew of from school of acquaintances that knew of this guy, but they, I guess they questioned him and they've talked to him several times, but there's nothing to connect him that we can find as far as DNA or anything like that. So,
and what do you know of the police investigation as it was then and now? I mean, were there witnesses? You said there was no CCTV. Any forensic evidence?
um, if there was, we won't know because they didn't dust prints. They didn't collect anything. I mean, they took Kelly's personal belongings that were laying there,
Yeah.
and I guess to see if they can get anything off that, but that turned up nothing, I guess, because they've since then released her purse and everything to the family. Um, the investigation today, so far, I have more confidence about this case and what's being done about it than I have in 38 years. Because in the beginning, the one lead detective, he was rude. He There was times where years later, when my daughter Kelly was in kindergarten, I would walk her to school, and this man lived in a house right across the street from where I'd have to go to cross for school. And he would literally do anything and everything to ignore me, to run from me. So he'd go behind the house or he'd go back in the house. So he was a jerk. I mean, that's all I can say is he was not, he gave us no hope, no anything.
And what
But
about
today,
this new detective? He's what, the complete opposite?
it's a young lady.
Oh. Hmm.
She is totally the complete opposite. She will answer my phone calls if I need to call her. Um, we just did a story. I did, me and mom, in July on our local news station, and it received several tips. But she, for some reason, makes me feel like somebody cares in that department. She knows that they messed up from the get go. Um, she's got fresh eyes. She's got an eager attitude. She just pounding the pavement. She does not want to leave this unsolved any longer than it has to. And I'm really impressed with her.
I mean, that's all you want as a family, isn't it? Somebody
Yeah.
who listens and who you think is fighting your case, basically.
Yes.
That's
Excuse
really
me.
great. So what do you know what she's you've said she doesn't want this case to remain unsolved for, as you say, 38 years. Do you know what she sort of plans on doing in the future?
Um, from the tips that were received here recently,
Hmm.
she's going to check into those, of course. She's already started doing that. Um, she organized the files because when she got them, they were not even chronologically in order. Um, I saw the box and it looked like they were just thrown in the box. Like, well, we can't do anything about this. It's too, that's the feeling I've always had. But now, with, I've talked to her in person, I've spoken to her on the phone several times, and she has compassion. She has determination. And I'm really hopeful that something will come out of this eventually.
And without mentioning names again, were there either at the time or now any persons of interest in Kelly's case?
And there's been several, yes. Um, Nothing has panned out, of course, but with the names that she's got, I don't know them because it would hurt the investigation. She doesn't want stuff slipped out, but she has hope that something's going to come out of these leads that she just received.
Okay, well, that will explain my next question for you is going to be why haven't charges been brought against them? But if they're new persons of interest, that's potentially quite, I don't want to say exciting, but that's hopefully a step in the right direction.
Yes, and they can't really charge anyone yet because they don't have any forensic evidence. But she's questioning even other witnesses that have come forward to say stuff. And like I say, I don't know what those things have been said. She's given me a little bit of info, but not enough to where I can say for sure that these people know things. Because some of the tips that she received after the news were basically, "Oh, I think I saw a truck there that night," or just little things they can't describe it or anything like that. So of course, they check into it, but how can you check into? I think I saw a truck that night. That's
Well, yeah,
almost 40 years ago.
absolutely. Now, from what we've discussed, you've got Kelly going to work. You've got these three um, alarming phone calls to the police. And it said that the police officer, after the third phone call, he arrived 2 minutes later. And it is as if Kelly has almost like she's just walked out. I mean, as you
Yes.
say, her cigarette was on the side, magazine, purse, etc. And it's like she sort of disappeared. Were there any witnesses who claim to have seen anything at that? I'm trying to imagine a busy highway. As you say, it was late at night, so I suppose it wouldn't be
Yeah, it wasn't as
really
busy
busy.
back then. It was a kind of quiet highway at night back then.
It strikes me as so bizarre, absolutely bizarre. Do you or your family have any theories as to what might have happened?
Um, no, not really. There's theories that we have that we don't let out in public. Um,
Of course.
I'm trying to say this without. My dad has had a gut feeling from the beginning, and I got that gut feeling a little while later about what could have happened and of who may know something of what happened. But so far, we haven't proved that yet. We're hoping too soon. Because, like I say, after this last news story, the lady that did the news story on our local news, she's fantastic. She did a whole segment instead of just a minute or two. She did a nice segment of it, and that really put it out there even more. So we'll have to see how that goes. We're hoping to touch somebody's conscience, I guess you can say. Now that everybody's almost 40 years older,
Yeah.
and we're hopefully that, or maybe it's somebody that is sick and maybe dying one day, you know, I'm just using speculation here,
Mm.
that maybe somebody would give a deathbed confession, or, that's all our hopes right there. You look at every scenario of how can this person go 38 years and not have a conscience enough to say, hey, I've got to let this off my mind. I don't see how a person can do that for 38 years and go to sleep every night and live their life. And I mean, I'm not trying to be cruel, but whoever did this or knows about it, I'm I hope they're suffering. I hope their conscience is like really messed up, and eventually they get too much with it and tell what happened.
No, it's a very good question. How do you live with something like this for 38 years without needing to burst? You
Mm-hmm.
know, I don't know. How are your family doing now?
We're doing okay. It's still hard, and I still miss her every day. We all do.
Of course.
Um, I guess sometimes I look back and think, well, she's a grandmother, and she never got to personally be one. She would have two grandchildren right now. If she does, but she didn't get to experience that. She didn't get to experience becoming an aunt. Um, to go into school, she didn't. This person took sorry,
It's okay.
everything away from her
Yeah.
and from us. Um, she would love all of her nieces and nephews, and her grandsons are wonderful little boys. And her oldest grandson looks like her. It's so uncanny how much he looks like her.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and she didn't get to experience that. She didn't get to get the joy of knowing what it feels like to be a grandparent, or knowing what it felt like to, like we did when her daughter was born. We got to become aunts, and she never did. That was an exciting day, and I was like 14 years old, 13 or 14 when she had my niece, and it felt so cool to be in high school and be an aunt already. And it's it's been a lot of things you think about that she didn't get to do, and they took her away from us, and it's not fair to anybody with a family like mine. It's not fair.
Of course. And with you don't have to sort of give me specific details, but how is Kelly's daughter doing? Because I think she was only about 5 when
Yes, she was 4 years old when my
4 years
two
old.
years. Um, sh- that's another thing. Kelly didn't get to experience her. She was excited because Tammy was starting school that year, and she didn't get that joy of her child's first day of school, um, her child's graduation, her child's marriage, her graduating, like from high school and going to college for a few years. And she's she handles it in her own way. She doesn't talk about it much. She doesn't remember a whole lot because she was only a young child. But we'll tell her what features she has of her mother's, or her, like, when she's mad or upset, she gets that real pouty look and stays quiet for a little bit. So we kind of pick on her about that, like, oh, that's how your mother used to do, or um, her characteristics as far as her features are like Kelly's. So when we talked to her in July, or we saw her in person in July. She's doing okay. She's doing the best she can to deal with it in her own way.
There is an organization that you wanted to talk about who you said has been a sort of great support for you and your family.
Yes, I've got the shirt on. The Aware Foundation. It was founded by Kenny Geralds, and he is wonderful for not just my family, but he is out pounding the pavement all the time for missing persons all over the country, and he lives here in Virginia. The the foundation is based in Virginia, but even if he has to stay up all night long, I noticed a post this morning. But it's 4 a.m. and I'm still working because we had a 2-year-old missing local here yesterday.
Oh my God.
But they found her. Her father had taken her, but everybody's safe. But him and his organization, they put out flyers. They support the families. Like, I needed to talk, so I called him yesterday, and he's right there. He called me right back. Um, they do events, which this year he's kind of sad they haven't been able to because of COVID-19.
Yeah.
He came up 2 years ago. I decided to organize just a sort of like a vigil for Kelly, and actually that's how I met him, a vigil for the missing in our valley, um, a few years back. But he came 2 hour drive here to be at this event and help me do this event, and it was really nice. Her friends got to come through. Anybody that wanted to come, I had put it on Facebook, and we just enjoyed talking about Kelly. My mom had the memory book, and it was just a nice day. And that's what he does. He does that, and he'll hold other events, around the valley. He stays on the phone with persons' families. He's always willing to go all the way until something's solved, even if it's like my sister, 38 years and still going. And he still helps me put it out there.
It must be, I don't know if the word is comforting, but to have somebody or a group of people who have gone through the same thing that you and your family have gone through, as you say, whether it is a case like Kelly's that was 38 years ago or whether it happened yesterday, that feeling to be able to sort of talk about it with others who understand must be an amazing resource.
It is, because I mean, everybody that knew Kelly that I went to school with, at least they say, I can't imagine how you feel. And then in retrospect of having someone say, oh, this, I know how you feel. Well, unless you've been through this, no, you don't. So I'm glad we don't get a lot of that, because I would probably say something rude, and I'm not a rude person. But to have people in his foundation, he actually connected me with a young girl, well, yeah, yesterday, that they found her sister's remains already, but they haven't arrested any of the persons of interest or solved that part of it yet. But she's been pushing for her sister as hard as I've been pushing for mine. And he thought that she's been having a hard time. So he connected me and her yesterday, and we spoke a little on Messenger yesterday. And it just feels, it's a bad situation to feel good to have someone to talk to.
Yeah.
If that's the right way to say it.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But at least she knows how I feel that someone took her sister's life and took away anything and everything from her as well. So it's nice to be connected with people like that, to have for support, even if you don't talk to them, even if it's just a, hey, I hope you're having a good day on a post or something like that.
If I can ask this question, with you said that lady's case, they found her sister's remains and but they haven't arrested anyone. Really, you just want answers. I mean, Kelly's case is really unusual in as far as it does just seem like she walked out of the gas station.
Yeah, it's sort of like that show Vanished Without a Trace.
Yes.
It's that's what baffles me. It's like poof, like a magic disappearing act person, when the box, you look and they're gone. But that person can come back into that box. Well, Kelly just disappeared, and there's no trace, not even any paths that lead to where, which way they went. We don't know if they went north or south when they left. The mountains we have here, there's so many places that this person could have taken her. So many rivers, so many quarries. It's just insane, the things you think about. Well, even when I travel from here to UVA, I still find myself looking over the ridges, like over the mountains, and thinking, could she be out there? She's somewhere out there, and I'm not going to give up until we figure this out.
If anyone has a tip or any information, what are the best contact details that they should reach out to?
I should have wrote this down. Harrisonburg, Virginia Police Department,
Mhm.
and Brooke Wetherall is the lady who is in charge of this case. I don't know if this will let me go look at my contacts without cutting us off. Oh, goodness.
Well, what I can do, I can add them in the show notes if that's easier.
Yes.
Yeah. I'm
I can.
also going to add the details for the Aware Foundation as well, so that people can have a look at that as well, because that sounds like an amazing organization.
Yeah, they can. Anyone who has Facebook can look up the Aware Foundation itself, and the cover is their banner. So I don't think it's too hard to find. I'm not sure if there's any other foundations out there called the Aware Foundation, but it's, like I said, based in Virginia, so that would be another thing to look for. But if they search on Facebook for the Aware Foundation, it should come up.
Before we end, Elaine, is there anything else that you wanted to say or to share?
Just that I thank you for wanting to do this with me, and I'm grateful for the coverage that people do for me and my family. And I don't think anybody that the person's of interest, if they see this, I just wish somebody would tell something. If they know something, it's been almost 40 years. Let it out. Let it just ease your own conscience and let it go and let us know that where my sister is. I would love to be able to lay her to rest in peace before my parents leave this world. That's my biggest thing. I want it done for the whole family, but mainly for my mom and my dad.
Of course.
But
I
it's
hope
been really hard on them.
I can't even imagine. I
And
can't.
it was Father's Day weekend. And
Yeah.
that's why I told her I'd see her that weekend, because we were supposed to have dinner for my dad for Father's Day. And she had already brought her gift and laid it in the dining room. So I think Father's Day is still hard for him. So we try to do what we can to make it better when we can. They live 6 hours from me right now, which thank God is better than 15 when they lived in Florida. But no, if somebody knows something, I wish they would just go ahead and say something. It's it's hard to describe what that feeling would be like if that did happen. I don't know how elated I'm going to be, or I think it's going to be kind of surreal, because I'm going to want to be angry, but I'm also going to be happy that the body can be laid to rest and that we could have some kind of justice. She deserves that.
It seems to me it is a double-edged sword, isn't it? In as far as you will have answers, which is obviously what you all desperately want, but similarly, it's gonna be painful as well.
Yes.
If anyone has any information, I'm going to leave the relevant contact details in the show notes. I will also leave a link to the Aware Foundation. Please go and give it a look. I'd like to say a huge, huge thank you to Elaine for taking the time to speak with me today. I really appreciate it.
You're very welcome. Thank you, and keep in touch.
Of course, I will. Thank you so much, and I will speak to you soon, Elaine.
Alrighty, thank you, and you have a wonderful day.
If you have any information that might help Kelly's family get some answers, I've left the details of the Harrisonburg Police Department in the show notes. I've also left a link to the Aware Foundation's Facebook page. They do such great work, so please go and check them out. Thank you so much for joining me today. The Student's Verdict is a bi-weekly podcast, so follow us on social media to hear about our next episode. See you on the next one. This episode is dedicated to Kelly and her family.